Continue. Okay, so excuse me. Thank you all very much for joining tonight. Tonight we are joined by Craig Dietrich from Penn State, and even though he represents Penn State, he is here tonight to talk about financial aid in general. So whether or not you have Penn State on your list of schools, it doesn't really matter because he's going to touch on all the important points about financial aid. He is in the Office of Student Aid and is the Student Aid Coordinator. And I am going to stop talking now and turn this over to Craig. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And welcome everyone and good evening. As Kate said, my name is Craig Dietrich and I am here from the Penn State Office of Student Aid. I do work in student aid, not at admissions. So as I tell all my students when I'm presenting this, I'm not here to try to talk anybody into coming to Penn State or hopefully out of coming to Penn State. I'm just here to share some information with you. And my job is basically to help those who decide to come to Penn State, how to make it work for you financially. So lots of information I'm going to share this evening, most of which can be applicable no matter where you decide to go to school. So if you have questions throughout the presentation, again, certainly put those in the chat. We'll have some time at the end if you want to unmute and ask your question live. You may be able to do that as well. So, all right, we'll go ahead and kick things off here and get started. So, here's basically an overview of the presentation we're going to take a look at tonight. We're going to start by talking about the FAFSA, or the Free Application for Federal Student Aid. We'll talk about some different types of financial aid students could possibly see when they get that financial aid offer. We'll talk about some satisfactory academic progress, or SAP. We use lots of acronyms in the financial aid world, so if I forget to mention what something means and I forget that, let me know and I'll be happy to kind of tell you what it stands for. Talk about understanding your financial aid budget, some financing strategies 101, share some resources from our YouTube channel. We post a lot of videos and webinars that we do on a monthly basis for both new and continuing students. And then we'll end by sharing some scholarship resources, again, that will be useful no matter where the students decide they may want to go to school. All right, so first question, why should you file your FAFSA? Number one, it does have to be filed each and every single year. Okay, it's important to file that FAFSA for several different reasons. It is your application for all types of federal aid. And at most institutions, it's also going to get you access to institutional aid, possibly state aid. I know with the state of Pennsylvania, we have a state grant agency that requires the FAFSA to be filed. Your state may as well. And at Penn State specifically, I know a lot of colleges, probably 90 to 95% of the scholarships that we award require the FAFSA to be filed. So it's always a good idea to make sure you file that FAFSA. As we said, it is free. We're hearing fantastic things this year. We've been out and about doing some FAFSA completion nights at schools. We had one at a local high school here last week with over 120 attendees, and almost all of them were able to complete it in about 15 to 20 minutes or less. So it's going really, really well this year. So we're pretty excited about that. Much nicer than things were kind of happening last year. So a couple things to bring to your attention. If your students are planning on starting in the summer next year, they may need to file both the 25-26 and 26-27 FAFSAs. At Penn State, the summer is a trailing semester, so next summer is part of the current academic year. The following fall, spring, and then summer of 2026 would be the 26-27 FAFSA. So you can actually file both of those. I'm going to show you the landing page here in a little bit, and you'll see where both of those are located. So just make sure you know whatever school the student might attend, whether they would need to file the 25-26 or not. The 26-27 FAFSA did open officially on October 1st, so it's been open here now for about a month. It actually opened about a week before that for kind of testing purposes, and like I said, it's going very, very well this year, so we're pretty excited. Another thing to be aware of is that some schools, at Penn State, we only use the FAFSA, that's it. Some schools also use something called the CSS profile. That's a different FAFSA or different financial aid application. It's much more complex. Again, right now, people that are doing the FAFSA online, completing it in about 15 to 20 minutes or less. From what I hear about the CSS profile, it takes sometimes 2 hours or more to complete. It's a little bit more detailed, asks a lot more questions than the FAFSA does. But the good news is, if your school requires it, that typically means that there's a much higher chance of them receiving institutional aid from that particular school. Okay, unlike the FAFSA, the CSS profile is not free. It costs $25 for the first school that you file and $16 for each additional school. However, there are certain eligibility criteria that could make it free. For example, if the student is eligible for a SAT waiver, they can do the CSS profile for free. If the parent's adjusted gross income is $100,000 or below, students can apply for the CSS profile for free. And if the student happens to be an orphan or a ward of the court anytime after the age of 13, they can apply that CSS profile for free as well. So just something to keep in mind. Again, if you're not sure, if your school requires it, reach out and ask them. They should be able to let you know. If you're coming to Penn State, only need the FAFSA and you're good to go. All right, when you go to the studentaid.gov site, that's where you would file the FAFSA at. And in fact, there you could also apply for things like the Parent Plus loan that we're going to touch on later. You can get loan information. You can get pretty much anything that you need about financial aid as far as federal aid goes at that studentaid.gov site. This is going to be the landing page. If you click to file a new FAFSA, it's going to open automatically the 26-27 FAFSA. That one will be based upon your 24 tax data. So it's always 2 years prior. So several years ago, they changed it. It used to be 1 year's prior tax data, but a lot of people would file for an extension of their tax return. October would roll around, their taxes weren't done yet, and then it delayed the FAFSAs being processed or submitted. So several years ago, they moved it back to prior tax year. That way there should be no issues with everybody having their taxes filed, ready to go. You can see right below the start new form on this page is the 25-26 FAFSA as well. Again, depending upon your situation, starting in the summer and what part of the academic year it is, you may have to do both FAFSAs. Good news is with the new FAFSA, you have no choice but to give permission for your information to be uploaded directly from the IRS. If you don't get permission for that to happen, your FAFSA will not be processed and it won't be valid. So it imports that information usually in only a couple minutes, and it saves you from having to type in all that financial data. There are certain things that you do need to type in. You're going to need to have information about your cash checking and savings as of the day you file the FAFSA. You'll need to have information about assets that you might have, 529 plans, things like that. You might need to have information on any kind of child support received. It's always a good idea to have your tax return with you just in case you need it when you're filing the FAFSA, but in most cases you don't. It uploads that information automatically, and it really is a pretty seamless process this year. All right. Before you can file the FAFSA, you need to create what's called an FSA ID. Every student needs one for sure, and at least one parent. Now, depending upon the parent's filing status and their marital status, both parents could potentially need to have an FSA ID. So if you're unsure who your parent contributor is, on that studentaid.gov site, there are a lot of great resources. There's a nice flow chart that'll help you decide who your contributors are. There's also a contributor wizard that'll ask you some questions, and based upon your answers, it'll tell you who the contributors are. So to give you an example there, if your parents are married and file a joint tax return, then only one of your parents would need an FSA ID because it's going to pull that information jointly for both. If your parents would be married but file separate returns for some reason, then both are going to need to have an FSA ID. Likewise, if it's a family where a biological parent is separated from the other biological parent or divorced, if that parent is remarried, it's going to be the biological parent plus the step parent. In that situation, potentially both could have an FSA ID, again, depending upon the marital status and whether it's a joint tax return or not. So it gets a little bit tricky, but if you're unsure, again, lots of fantastic resources on the studentaid.gov site. As far as the FSA ID goes, it's the legal signature that makes your FAFSA valid. So this information is going to be verified by the Social Security Administration. So 3 things that are important. When you set up your FSA ID, you want to make sure you have your Social Security card with you because you want to type your name exactly as it appears on your card. You want to make sure you're very careful when you type in your date of birth and your Social Security number because all of those things are going to be checked. And if something doesn't match up, it could delay you receiving your financial aid offer. Previously, it used to take about 3 to 4 days for them to verify your identity before you could use that FSA ID. This year, you can create that ID right now, log in 5 minutes later, and start your FAFSA. The verification process happens instantly as long as there's no conflicts. So again, use your card, make sure you type your name in exactly as the way it appears, you're good to go. The other thing that's important, especially for students, is to make sure you do not use a high school email. Typically, after you graduate, that high school email access goes away pretty quickly. You need to have access to the email that's associated with your ID all throughout your college career. So use a personal email. That's pretty important. All right. I see some questions popping up here in the chat. If we're okay, I'm going to kind of go through the presentation. We'll go back and answer some of those questions at the end, but we'll definitely make sure we get to those. So, a little bit of information about how the financial aid is determined. Every school is going to take information based upon your tuition and fees, your housing and food costs, a bunch of miscellaneous costs like transportation. There's always some extra room built in there. We put together what's called your cost of attendance or COA. Typically, that cost of attendance is anywhere from $5,000 to $6,000 or $7,000 above and beyond what you're actually going to have to pay. It gives you some extra room because the cost of attendance sets the maximum amount of financial aid that you can have per the federal government's regulations. And we say financial aid, that means scholarships, grants, loans, anything that you can use to help pay your bill is considered financial aid. So, school's going to calculate that cost of attendance. We're going to take your SAI or student aid index from your FAFSA information. We're going to subtract those two, and that number gives us your need. So, other than just having no more aid than your cost of attendance, you also cannot have any more need-based aid than your need as determined by this formula. Need-based aid sources would be scholarships, grants, federal work study, anything that's kind of a free money source. If you're curious about things like the federal Pell Grants, your SAI from your FAFSA has to be around 7,000 or less, give or take. There are some fluctuations there. That's why I say around 7,000. Now, to give you an idea, typically if you have an adjusted gross income of anywhere over $100,000, it's a very good chance you're probably not going to qualify for a federal Pell Grant. The way the Pell Grant works is if you just barely qualify, you could get as little as about $800 per year, split equally between the fall and the spring semesters. Or if you qualify for the maximum amount this year, that's $7,395. Typically, for maximum Pell Grant consideration, you're looking at an adjusted gross income of definitely below $70,000 total. For Pennsylvania, we have what's called FEA, the Pennsylvania Higher Education Assistance Agency. They have state grants that they give out. Their threshold's a little bit higher. Your state might have a grant agency program as well. Not sure what the threshold would be for that. The one thing that we know that every student that files a FAFSA is going to be awarded for sure is a direct student loan. So a federal direct student loan. For first year students, that total amount is $5,500. It's been the same amount for a very long time. A couple things about that loan. Number one, if you have no need, so if your cost of attendance is lower than what your SAI is, that can happen because the SAI can be anywhere from a negative 1,500 is the lowest. The maximum amount is $999,999. So if that SAI is above the cost of attendance and you have no need, then you're going to only be eligible for what's called an unsubsidized loan. If you have need based upon that formula, you could qualify for up to $3,500 of that being subsidized. Big difference is this. The subsidized loan is kind of like free money. The government's going to pay the interest for the student, so it won't accrue any interest until after the student graduates. Both loans are deferred until about 6 months after graduation. The unsubsidized loan will begin accruing interest from the very beginning. So we always highly suggest or encourage students, once they find out, if you do accept and take any unsubsidized loans, you want to reach out to your loan servicer. There's 3 different companies that service the federal loans. You'll find out about 1 month or so after you accept the loans and it applies towards your bill. Reach out to them and ask, how much money do I need to pay just to cover the interest? Because if they can do that, and usually it's only 20, 30 bucks a month, it's not a lot of money, it can end up saving them thousands of dollars after they graduate in terms of repayment. Okay, both of those loans are a 6.39% interest this year. It was actually lowered a little bit. Last year it was 6.57, I believe. But they also do come with a 1.057% origination fee. So even though it's $5,500, it's going to be around $5,440, somewhere in that range. So they take that 1.05% off the top before it applies towards your bill. Okay, those loan amounts will increase. It's not by year, but it's actually by credits. So as long as the student has earned at least 29.1 credits after the first year, it'll go up to 6,500 for year 2. After they earn 59.1 credits, it'll go up to 7,500 for years 3 and 4. But 7,500 is the most it will ever be for a dependent student. So again, that direct loan is the only guaranteed financial aid source from the FAFSA. A lot of the other aid sources depends upon your SAI, depends upon those other factors that we talked about. So something to consider for those federal direct student loans, even though those are loans, again, especially if they qualify for subsidized, it's free money because it doesn't accrue any interest. It's a good way to have students have some skin in the game, so to speak. And it's also a really good way to help them establish some credit as an adult after they graduate. So it's something you might want to consider. Obviously, take the unsubsidized loan only if you have to, but the sub loan, not a bad idea to help establish some credit and give the students, again, a little bit of skin in the game, so to speak. All right. Here are all the different types of financial aid. Again, we talked about the federal direct loans. That's the 5,500. Federal grants would be the Pell Grant. Federal work study. It used to be you could indicate on your FAFSA if you wanted to be considered for federal work study. It is a need-based aid source, so you have to have need based upon that formula we talked about. But now you have to reach out to the school and ask to be considered. So if you would be interested in federal work study and you have need, you can reach out to the school and ask them to be considered for that. We are limited with the number of awards that we can give. At Penn State, it's typically a $4,000 award. It's not a guaranteed amount. It just gives the student a chance to apply for and earn up to $4,000 based upon hours that they work throughout the course of the year. And state grants through FIA. Your state might have state grants as well. We have both private and alternative loans. Obviously, scholarships through our office, through the departments or the colleges. We have lots of external scholarship sources, and we're going to share some of those here in a little bit. At Penn State, we have lots of wage payroll jobs. So if you don't qualify for work study and you want to work, there's always an opportunity to do that. Wage payroll, work study are exactly the same. It's just a matter of who's footing the bill. Lots of off-campus employment as well. And something I would highly encourage you to do if you're considering working at school is look for employers that have some educational benefit. So what I mean by that is that not only do you sometimes earn a paycheck, but sometimes you might get some tuition assistance. Maybe the employer has some type of a scholarship program that you can apply for. So look for those through the students' employers and also through the parent employers, because sometimes parents have an employer that has a benefit that you're not aware of. So things to check out to hopefully try to lower that amount that you're going to need to pay. All right, so now that we've talked a little bit about how the financial aid is calculated, let's talk about what you need to do to make sure you maintain your aid eligibility. So we have something called Satisfactory Academic Progress, or SAP. There are 3 different parts to SAP. The first one on the left is a 2.0 cumulative GPA. So on a 4-point scale, that would be a C minus or above. For most students, that's not that big of a deal. Although sometimes, that first year can be a transition period. Sometimes we have a little more fun than we probably should. And so you got to be careful. If there's any education majors on the Zoom here tonight, keep in mind that for education, that 2.0 jumps up to a 3.0. So there are some different levels depending upon the major. There could be some other majors where the GPA requirement's a little higher as well. So again, that one's usually not too bad. The one in the middle, the 67% completion rate, is the one that can be really tricky, especially at the beginning of a student's career. Students have to complete 67% or more of the credits that they attempt. So most students realize, well, if I fail a course, obviously I didn't complete it, so that would count as an uncompleted credit. But what students don't realize is that late dropped classes also count as uncompleted credits. At Penn State, you have 1 week into the semester to decide if you're going to drop a class or not. If you drop it one day after that 1 week period is up, it counts as a late drop and it affects your completion rate. So, scenario, you take 15 credits as a freshman. Second week of class, you decide that one class isn't for you. You decide to drop it. Since it's a late drop, now you're down to 12 out of 15 or 80%. You're still in good shape. But let's say you finish the semester out, one of your classes you end up failing. Now we're down to 9 out of 15, which is 60%. You're below that 67%, so now you've got an issue with SAP. Good news is we always give students a warning semester, so you have that next semester to get back up above 67%. But if you don't, all of your federal aid sources can be removed. There is an appeals process because there's always extenuating circumstances, but it's something that you just want to be aware of. When students are starting out with not many credits, that completion rate can really be affected a lot by either failing or dropping a course late. So keep that in mind. The last piece to SAP would be what we call maximum time frame. It's 150%. If you think about it, it should kind of make sense because 67% is basically 2/3. The reciprocal of 2/3 is 3/2. 3/2 would be 150%. I taught high school math for 19 years, so I always like to throw out some numbers just to take me back to my olden days, I guess. So to put it into simpler terms, let's say your program or your degree is 120 credits. 150% of 120 would be 180. You can actually take up to 180 credits in order to earn your 120 credit degree. As soon as you would schedule one class beyond 180, you are no longer eligible for federal aid. So again, any failed classes, any late drop classes count. Students that go in and start in one major and then switch to a different major, some of those credits may not apply to that new major. So there's a lot of reasons why students could end up getting close to that 150%. Typically, it doesn't happen until their final year, but it's just something to be aware of. Again, kind of makes sense when those two are thought about because of the 2/3 and the 3/2 fractions there. So all of those things have to be met to maintain SAP. If you're going to be SAP ineligible, your school is going to let you know. If you have questions, just reach out. A couple other things to keep in mind is that you must be enrolled at least half time to be eligible for most forms of federal aid. That's 6 credits or more for undergraduates, 5 credits or more for graduates. 12 credits is considered full-time, but if you only schedule 12 credits per semester, you're not going to be able to graduate in 4 years. Obviously, adding on extra time means extra costs. Something to consider. At Penn State, anything between 12 and 19 credits is the same price. So if you can take closer to 19 credits, you may even be able to finish a semester early, maybe even a year early, depending upon credits you bring in from high school. That could save you a lot of money. So just things to keep in mind. If you take over 19 credits at Penn State, then you do pay a surcharge on top of your normal tuition rate. All right. Again, as far as SAP goes, you're not meant to be experts. We're the experts. So if you have any questions, reach out, let us know. I just wanted to make sure you're aware of those things at the beginning, especially like I said, when you don't have many credits in the bank, so to speak, your completion rate can really be affected very quickly. All right. This is an example of the cost calculator that we have at Penn State. Almost every school has a cost calculator posted on their website somewhere, so you can put in information and find out what your costs are going to be. As an in-state student at Penn State, all in first year, room board, tuition fees, the whole 9 yards, you're looking at between $32,000 and $36,000, give or take. That's for in-state. I know you guys are all out of state, so out of state, you're looking at probably closer to $52,000 to $56,000. So it's quite a bit more for out of state. Okay. The question that we get a lot in financial aid is, well, what if my student lives there and they have their own apartment and they establish residency? Could they be considered in-state for tuition year 2? And the answer, unfortunately, is typically no. So once you come here initially as an out-of-state student for tuition, you typically are always an out-of-state student. The only people that we would consider giving in-state tuition to is if there is military, so veterans, retired or disabled veterans in the family, their parents, things like that. Okay. So this calculator can kind of go through and show you the costs that you might expect to see. There is some variation depending upon campus location. University Park is our main campus. It's also by far our most expensive campus. A lot of our Commonwealth campuses are significantly cheaper. In fact, for out-of-state students, one of the Commonwealth campuses is typically pretty close to the same cost for in-state students at University Park. It's usually $15,000 to $20,000 or more or less compared to University Park. So it can be a huge savings. So definitely something worth considering. All right. At Penn State, we are hoping to put together financial aid offers and have them out to the students by February 1st. Our recommended or suggested filing deadline for the FAFSA is by December 15th, because we're going to start putting together offers in January. It takes us a while to kind of sort through everything because last year we had over 240,000 FAFSAs sent to us. So it takes a while to go through all those and figure it all out and get those aid offers out. So our goal is February 1st. The national acceptance deadline is May 1st. So that would give the students 3 months to compare all the offers, make their decisions, and decide if they want to accept their offer and come to Penn State. Other schools, that process and timing might be different. So just reach out to your school and see. All the offers will look very similar. This is what Penn State's looks like. At the top, you see your billable charges, tuition and fees, room and meals if you're living on campus. The second section is your estimated financial aid. It's going to be any grants, scholarships, etc., anything that you could get. It does say estimated. Especially the federal aid sources are estimated because it's based upon your SAI. If your SAI would change for some reason, sometimes that happens through a process called verification, where we ask you to provide proof of your information. Even though it's inputted from the IRS, sometimes there's some things that don't quite work right. So if anything changes on your SAI, it could change some of your federal aid sources. So it's always estimated initially. The bottom section is those non-billable charges, books and supplies, because we don't know what you're going to pay for your books, and you can get books wherever you want. It's transportation costs. You got to go back and forth to school at least once or twice a semester. Miscellaneous fees. So again, if you look at those costs, if you add the non-billable charges at the bottom to the billable charges at the top, that should give you that cost of attendance number we talked about earlier. But what you want to focus on is the section 3 here, and that's basically your billable costs minus your aid, basically your out-of-pocket expenses. Every school that you put on your FAFSA, and you can put up to 20 schools on your FAFSA, you will get something similar. So once you see all those, you can compare, see what each one is going to cost you out of pocket, and that's what you want to take a look at. Don't be afraid to apply to colleges that might be 80, 90, even $100,000 a year. Sounds crazy. Don't let that sticker shock scare you away, because most of those schools also give out tons and tons of aid. For example, there have been a whole bunch of schools recently around the country that guarantee if your parents make an adjusted gross income of less than $200,000, they're going to cover all of your tuition for you after your aid is factored in. So we have a local school here by us, St. Francis, that has announced that recently. Wake Forest College in North Carolina has announced that. There's been several other ones that have announced that. Okay, so take a look at that aid offer, see what the bottom line is, what are your out-of-pocket expenses going to be. That's what you want to use to make your decisions. Something else to consider when you're thinking about costs, you're not coming to college usually for 1 year. It's usually a 4-year commitment. So take into consideration your costs for all 4 years. You want to make sure you have a plan for that. At Penn State and at most colleges, there's going to be an increase to your tuition once the students get to year 3, typically, basically after 60 credits. At Penn State, that tuition jump can be anywhere from $2,000 to $8,000, depending upon your program and where you're going to. Again, University Park, usually more expensive than our Commonwealth campuses. Reason for that is typically in year 1 and 2, you're taking classes from teaching assistants or maybe instructors. And then once you get to year 3, primarily all of your classes are being taught by professors. So there's an increase to the cost and tuition there. So just something to keep in mind. All right. So as I said at the beginning, college is really expensive these days, no matter where you go. So the unfortunate reality is that a lot of students have to take on some type of financing to help cover those costs. The direct loans we talked about, the maximum amount that you can get is only $31,000. So usually that's not going to be enough to cover all 4 years. So what are the other options going to be? And that's what we're going to talk about next. Before you start thinking about financing, though, make sure you're taking advantage of all the opportunities for free money. Free money, scholarships. Academic colleges have scholarships available. You need to know what the process is at your school. I'll share some information here in a few minutes to show you what it looks like at Penn State. But again, your school could be very different. Same thing at the campuses. If you come to one of the Commonwealth campuses, I already mentioned it's much cheaper than University Park. Also, your chances at scholarships year 1 at University Park is much lower than it would be at a Commonwealth campus. Commonwealth campuses have their own pool of money. They're smaller, much higher chance of getting scholarships in year 1 than at University Park. We'll talk about why here in a few minutes. We do have installment payment plans available, but the first option for financing would be something called the Federal Direct Parent Plus Loan. That is a loan in the parent's name. If a parent would choose to apply for that, you would apply at studentaid.gov, same site we file the FAFSA. Previously to July of 2026, you could borrow up to the student's cost of attendance minus their other aid. So if you needed $40,000 to cover the costs, you could apply for all $40,000. Due to the new bill that President Trump passed recently, that is going to change starting in July. You're only going to be allowed to take out a maximum of $20,000 per dependent student per year and a lifetime maximum of only $65,000. So it's going to force some people to have to look and consider private loan options in addition to that Parent Plus loan. There's both good and bad about the Parent Plus loan. I'll give you the abbreviated version on our website. There's tons of information. The good news about it, it is a very easy, quick loan to qualify for. Most people can apply, have an answer in 10 or 15 minutes. They really ask 3 questions. Do you have any bankruptcies in the last 5 years? Do you have any major delinquencies? Do you have any student loans of your own in default? If the answer to those questions is no, guarantee you're going to be eligible for that $20,000 per year. Bad news, everybody pays the same interest rate regardless of your income or credit. This year, that loan or that interest rate was actually lowered to 8.94%. It was 9.08% last year. and it comes with a 4.228% origination fee. So if you borrow the $20,000, only about $19,100 of it's going to apply towards your bill because they take that 4.228% off the top before it applies to your bill. So something to keep in mind. You do have to have a FAFSA filed to be eligible for the Parent Plus loan, and you must have an FSA ID. For students that plan to go to graduate school or have to go to graduate school, there used to be something called a Graduate Plus loan, very similar to the Parent Plus loan. But when students go to graduate school, they're independent, so the parents can't apply for a Parent Plus loan anymore. That program is discontinuing starting in July. So a lot of those students in grad school are going to have to consider private loans in addition to their federal direct loans. Graduate students do get $20,500 in unsubsidized loans from the FAFSA. Again, it's only unsubsidized, but $20,500 may or may not be enough to cover their costs. So the good news about the changes to the Plus loan is it is promoting a lot more competition for the private lenders. There's a lot more options out there. It used to be almost every private loan was in the student's name, and it would require a cosigner, especially if you want to get a decent low rate for the student. But there's starting to be more options that are in the parent's name as well. So again, with more push to those private loans instead of the Parent Plus loan, I think we're going to see more competition, hopefully drive the rates down a little bit. We've seen private loan rates anywhere from as low as 4% up to as high as 25 to 30%. It really can vary. It's very much dependent upon the credit score of the cosigner. Okay, the better the credit, obviously the lower the rate. Those loans are always deferred until after the student graduates because the student can't pay it back while they're in school, but it is going to gather whatever interest rate they're paying. So again, if you can make the interest payment, the student can, or if the parent wants to do that for them, and save the student thousands and thousands of dollars by the time they graduate. As we mentioned earlier, look for those employer tuition assistance programs or scholarship programs. And if there's any veterans at all, definitely reach out to the Office of Student Aid, or at Penn State, we have a veterans office. They help handle all of those things pertaining to any kind of veterans benefits, military benefits, GI Bill, etc. We have a whole entire office that takes care of all that for you. Makes it easy. All right. So now we're going to take a minute to talk about some scholarships. Again, scholarships are very important because every $1,000 scholarship really can probably save the student at least $1,500 to $1,600 in terms of more scholarship means less loans. Less loans means less interest that's going to accrue. So it's really important for students to put in some time and really try to see what they can do here. So I'll start with a little bit about the process at Penn State. So at Penn State, we have 14 different academic colleges. And I know that might be a little hard to see, but we have things like the College of Ag Science, College of Arts and Architecture, the College of Education, College of Engineering, etc. They all have their own pool of money. At Penn State, this is where our merit scholarship money comes from. Everything that we do in our office is tied directly to the FAFSA based upon need. Unfortunately, at University Park, almost all of our academic colleges tend to use what we call a retention reward model, meaning they don't typically give out a lot of money to first-year students. They tend to award more in the back end, meaning year 3 and 4. A couple different reasons for that. Number one, last year we had, again, over 200,000 applications to Penn State. So unfortunately, we just don't have to give out a lot of money to recruit people to come to Penn State. Maybe that's going to change in the future. I don't know. The other problem is that all of the money that comes through these colleges is donated by alumni. They get to pick and choose what they want the eligibility to be. Right now, the national average is around 60% of students change their major. So I, as a donor, don't want my money to go to a student first year in the College of Education if there's a 60% chance that they might be in the College of Liberal Arts second year. The other problem is if we award students in the first year and they change to a different college, we got to take the money away, and students aren't real happy about that. So that's why the majority of our colleges award in year 3 and 4, because once a student is in the college year 3, we know they're 95% likely to stay within that college. All right. At our Penn State Commonwealth campuses, right now we have 20 different Commonwealth campuses. We do have 7 that are earmarked to be closed at the end of the next academic year, but we still have lots of other campuses available. And as I said before, it can be significantly cheaper. If you're talking about out-of-state tuition and comparing a 4-year degree at a Commonwealth campus, and the degree says the same at the end. It doesn't say Penn State, Harrisburg. It doesn't say that. It's just Penn State. It's the same exact degree. All the courses are the same. A lot of advantages. You could be looking at a difference in savings of anywhere between $70,000 to $100,000 less for 4 years at a Commonwealth campus compared to University Park. It's really huge. Even for in-state students, it's typically anywhere between $30,000 and $50,000 less. So it's quite a big difference. So just something that you might want to consider. All right. Now, this is the best opportunity for most students, and that's going to be outside scholarships. So we have a lot of resources there for you to take a look at. So we'll talk about some of those now. Before we get started there, some tips and things that the students could consider at home. Always start by looking at your local chamber of commerce. If you're looking locally, you're going to be competing against a much smaller pool of candidates than you are for a national scholarship that's open to everybody in the entire country. So look at all these local resources first. I'm sure the high school there probably gives out lots of money. Almost all of our Center County schools here, I know, give out $100,000 to $200,000 or more in scholarships every year to their graduating class. So make sure you talk to your guidance counselors and know what the process is at your school. Again, check with your parents' employers. Look for those jobs. Places like McDonald's, believe it or not, is a really good one. They provide a lot of money to help you pay for school. Sheetz convenience stores. Students that come to college, you might want to consider things like becoming an RA. An RA is a resident assistant. If you get a resident assistant job, it can pay for your housing and food costs, which is going to save you anywhere between $13,000 and $15,000 a year. So there's a lot of ways to make it more affordable. You just have to be strategic and think about those things. All right. On our Office of Student Aid, we do have a couple social media pages on Twitter and Instagram where we post outside scholarships that are available to any students, regardless of whether you're coming to Penn State or not. We average about 1 or 2 new outside scholarships each and every single week. So definitely encourage you to go out and follow us on our social media pages. Couple things to keep in mind. All outside scholarship search engines should be free. If you ever come across one that says, pay us this money, we'll help you find scholarships, forget about it. There's so much out there that's free, you should never have to pay. So we have 4 particular search engines that we recommend and have listed on our website. Those would be the College Board, U.S. Department of Labor, Unigo, and FastWeb. FastWeb is probably one of our favorites because if the student creates an account, they can answer some questions and set it up, and they can really kind of hone in on specific scholarships that fit them. So it's a much smaller pool. They can set it up so that new scholarships get emailed to them every time they come in. So it's really a nice resource. It'll actually tell you, based upon your selections, I found 210 scholarships that you could apply to for a total amount potential of up to $450,000. So it's really a cool resource. The other ones are kind of basically just search engines to help you find outside things to apply to, but they're good resources as well. Biggest thing is all of these are open to high school students now. So start now. You do some research, there's lots of videos out there that you can find. Several years ago, there was a student who decided that instead of getting a part-time job in high school, she was going to take 5 to 10 hours every week starting in her sophomore year and search for outside scholarships. She did that for 3 years before she graduated, and by the time she was done, she had well over $300,000 in scholarship money available to use at college. So it's out there, and it can be accessed. You just have to put in a little bit of time to get there. One last thing I will mention for you guys specifically, since you're all from out of state, is Penn State. One of the greatest things about it is we have a huge alumni network, over 750,000 people. So alumni everywhere in the country. There's got to be an alumni association or group probably within an hour or 2 of where you live, maybe even closer. That's a great resource for outside scholarships with a much smaller pool of candidates. So make sure you reach out to your local alumni association if you're coming to Penn State. That's important. Last thing, never stop looking. Always apply for scholarships. We suggest you make it part of your process every 2 months, 3 months, a couple times a year, because if you get an outside scholarship to come in and your balance or your bill is paid, that money gets refunded to you. Once it's refunded, you can use it to pay for books, you can use it to pay for food, housing, anything else. You can save it to pay for the next semester if you want. So the outside scholarship process should be ongoing and never stop. All right. Last few slides here are just kind of showing you what some of those outside scholarship sources look like. That's what the College Board one looks like. It's called Big Future. Again, a great resource. There's the U.S. Department of Labor. Here is the Unigo one. Again, those are all fantastic sources, but these ones are kind of basically just search engines. Here's FAFSA. That's the one where, like I said, you can go through, really set up the account. You can answer a bunch of questions and really kind of narrow it down. And it'll actually email them to you if you ask it to. It's really a great resource. So highly encourage any student that doesn't have a FAFSA account, definitely set one up. At Penn State, anytime you get an outside scholarship, typically they can either be mailed directly to the student or they can be sent directly to the school. If it's mailed to the student, you need to send it into our bursar's office so it can be processed. So that is the address that you would want to send it to. It's also available on the bursar's website. Make sure whatever school you decide to attend, you know what the process is there. So that way those outside scholarships can be processed as quickly as possible. At Penn State, typically it gets applied to whatever semester when the scholarship comes in. Sometimes the scholarships specify that it has to be split between semesters. It just depends. But if it doesn't, it comes in the spring, we post it towards your spring bill. Or if there's no bill, again, we refund it to you. So just make sure you know what the process is at your school. Here's the information about our social media pages. Again, we have a Twitter page and an Instagram page. We also have a YouTube channel where we post a lot of videos that are fantastic. We do have a webinar series that we've started for new students. We do one every month starting in September. Our first webinar in September, we had over 1,800 people register for it. They do get capped at a certain number. We have a new one coming up on November 6th that's on scholarship search. So it's going to go into even more detail than what I've gone in here tonight for you. It unfortunately has already reached capacity. But the good news is we record them live when we do them and we post them to our YouTube channel. So you can go out and watch it. Some of those have over 2,000 views now after we've posted it to our page. So there's lots of good resources on that page. I'm going to show it to you here in a second so you can see what that looks like. Okay. We also, again, post those new scholarship opportunities. Big thing to consider is your eligibility requirements. Sometimes your scholarship might require a certain GPA, a certain number of credits you have to take. So usually at Penn State, if you get a scholarship, we tell you what those requirements are. So make sure you read that so that way you know. Okay, if you follow us on social media pages, we're going to post a lot of information about important dates, deadlines pertaining to financial aid. So even if you're not coming to Penn State, it's just good general information and updates for you. All right, here is what our YouTube page looks like in our resource video library. So again, several videos here from the webinars that we've already done. And again, we schedule a new one each and every single month for new students. It's always the first Thursday of the month. And we're going to start a new one next month for continuing students. That's going to be the third Wednesday of each month. And again, we always record them and post them. You'll also see here, it's kind of hard to see, but there's a whole series of Zoom with Craig videos that I've done to kind of walk through people and show you how to access information on our website. Our website is fantastic. There's tons of information out there, pretty much everything that you need, but it can be a little overwhelming and trying to figure out how to navigate it. So those videos help walk you through that, make it a little bit easier. This is our Office of Student Aid website here. It's www.psu.edu/costs-aid. Again, everything that we've talked about tonight can be found on that website. There is, too far, you go back. There is my email. My work email is cmd99@psu.edu. Have any questions, regardless of whether they're coming to Penn State or not? I'm very happy to answer questions. Send me an email. I'm working on a new program or a new project right now where we're trying to reach out to students that do what we call the 2+2 program. That means they start 2 years at a Commonwealth campus and then they come to University Park. And a lot of those students are unaware of how much more costly it is at University Park. So we want to try to get that information out to them and understand the aid changes that they're going to see before they come. So I set up Zoom sessions and meet with those students individually to kind of go over that information with them. I'm happy to do that for you folks as well. So if you have any questions, you want to go over something specific, or just have some general questions you would like to answer, I'm happy to set up a Zoom session individually and help you out. So feel free to send me an email and we can set something up. A new change that we made this year at University Park is we have what's called the Enrollment Services Center. Basically, it's one location. It's on the first floor of the Shields building. If you go in the front entrance of the building, it's on the left side of the room. They can answer questions about financial aid, admissions, and registrar all in one single location. Used to be students would come up to the third floor to see us in student aid, and we'd have to send them downstairs, and then they'd send us back up, and they were bounced around all over the building, and it was frustrating for us and the students. Now it's all one location. The registrar, admissions, financial aid on the left side, bursar on the right side. So pretty much any question that you have can be answered in one location. That's their new phone number and their email. But again, you're more than welcome to email me directly as well if you have questions, again, regardless if you're coming to Penn State or not. All right. Just a couple other things to share here with you. If you're considering one of our Commonwealth campuses, they all do have, with the exception of one, their own financial aid staff as well. So we definitely encourage you to reach out directly to them so you can find emails or contact information on our website for all the different campuses. In case you're curious, our second largest campus by size is Penn State Harrisburg. Penn State Harrisburg has over 5,000 students. It's growing. That's the campus that my daughter actually goes to and attends. She loves it down there. About 75% of students that go to Harrisburg end up staying in Harrisburg because they like it that much. But there's campuses all over the state. So sometimes you could start at a campus, come to University Park later. Depending upon your degree, you might be able to do all 4 years and save a whole bunch of money, like I talked about earlier. So the only campus that doesn't have their own financial aid staff is Penn State Mont Alto. Okay, because of some restructuring, and as I said, some of our campuses are going to be closing here after the next academic year. That campus doesn't have any financial aid staff left. So all those questions get funneled through University Park. All right, that is the last piece of information that I have to share. So I'll go back through now and see if I can.
So I have been answering a lot of these questions,
Okay,
but there is one
awesome.
that I was not able. There was one that I was not able to answer. So I was communicating with the parent who is here on a G4 visa, which and they don't pay taxes. So I explained that they don't qualify for FAFSA. You have to pay taxes for 3 years before you can get money that way. And she wanted to know what about concessional loans for G visa holders with US born students? Can they get a concessional loan?
That I'm not 100% sure about. So I know for if you're technically considered an international student, typically you can apply for private loans as long as you have a cosigner within the United States. So you'd have the cosigner living in the United States for that. But there are certain eligibility requirements for people that are eligible non-citizens to file the FAFSA. So I definitely encourage you to go out to studentaid.gov and check to see what those are, because sometimes you might not think you're eligible, but you may be. They are always kind of changing what those rules are. So definitely check out that information on the studentaid.gov site just to make sure you're not eligible to file.
Thank you. All right.
Absolutely.
I think for the most part, I have to say, you were incredibly thorough. I learned a lot. I was taking pictures of the screen. So, um, I really appreciate your taking the time, but just to give everybody else a chance, if there are any other questions, put them in there because I have to say that I think Craig is incredibly knowledgeable. Wait, oh, some new ones are coming in.
Yeah,
Uh,
definitely appreciate the
when
feedback.
filling out the
Thank you for that.
FAFSA, both my son and I need an FSA ID. Yes, the student and one parent.
Yeah, so if the
Um,
parent's filing a joint tax return, then it's only one parent. If it would be, again, filing a separate tax return for some reason, then both parents would need one in that case. If you're unsure, go out to that website. Again, there's the flow chart on there, or there's the contributor wizard that'll walk you through and let you know who needs to have one for sure.
okay. He will invite you. Okay.
Yeah,
Um,
just saw that
one
question
thing,
about who fills with us. Yeah, go ahead.
one question I have, I mean, one thing, I don't remember if you said this or not because I was busy looking at the chat and letting people in. Did you did you mention if parents are divorced that things changed a little bit? It used to be who you spent the most time with, now it's who makes the most money. Did you mention that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it did change. So it used to be whichever parent that you lived with the 12 months prior to filing the FAFSA. They changed that recently. So now it's basically which parent provides more support. So if it's a separated family, the parent that's on your FAFSA may not be the parent that you live with. Whichever parent provides more support, that's the initial selection. What if it's 50-50? That's what we get asked most. What if it's split 50-50? Well, then the government says you got to pick the person that makes more money and has higher assets. But I will tell you this, they aren't going to check. They never ask you to check and verify that that parent is the correct parent. You're basically making that decision. So take that for what it's worth.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely.
And then I think I just answered this one correctly. It's the question. I think it's easier for me to read them to you than for you to have to look through these. But I
Yeah,
am a naturalized citizen. My daughter becomes a citizen by default. We applied for her citizenship certificate. We've not received it. Should we put citizen or green card holder? Doesn't matter.
so if you've attained citizenship through naturalization, I believe you're eligible, but just double check on the site, it'll tell you. Now, if you have a green card, you may need to wait until you receive that citizenship document before you can officially file. But like I said, check on the website, they'll let you know for sure.
So I thought green card holders were eligible for FAFSA just like everybody else. Is
They
that not
could
correct?
they could be. Like I said, I'm not quite as familiar with all
I'm a
those.
green card holder, so
Yeah, there you go. So you're probably correct then. Yeah. So like, so that part of it, we have a
You
team in our
probably don't
office
get a
that
lot of
deals with
those.
all of that stuff. So I'm like, just don't want to give you the wrong information, but yeah.
No, that's okay. All right, so there's one more. Let's see what just came through. Who fills out the FAFSA? Okay, the student fills out the FAFSA and then invites the parent, one parent, to go in and do their part of it.
Yes, and the parent can do their part first, but I will tell you this, if the parent does their part first, it's going to add extra work for you to do. If the student does their
Yes.
part first, it's going to import all of their demographic information in for you and save you a lot of time of filling stuff out. So I would let the student do their part first. They will invite the contributors. You'll get the email invitation usually instantly or the next day. So it really is pretty simple. So both parent and student would have to use the FSA ID to sign it. You have to both individually sign your own portion. Okay, so yeah, it
You
seems to
cr
be pretty seamless this year.
Yeah, and you each have to have so one parent has an FSA ID and one student has an FSA ID. Okay, the parent's FSA ID is going to be tied to the student,
Correct.
but you
Yep, it'll
you
all
both have to
match
have
together.
one.
Yep, correct.
Um,
You have more than
if a
one student, you do have to file separate FAFSAs for the students. That's something that we get a question about a lot. I'm seeing lots of questions about the assets. That is probably something that is a little bit tricky sometimes. Again, there's a lot of good information on the website as well, but there's a couple of changes this year to the asset questions. It used to be that if you have a family business with 100 or fewer employees, that did not have to be reported. 2 years ago, then they said, oh, now you have to report it. Now we're back to not reporting it. So if you have a family owned business with 100 employees or less, you do not have to report that as an asset. If you have a investment farm, that no longer has to be reported either. If you have a commercial fishing business, that does not have to be reported. Here's what you want to think about in terms of the assets. If it's something that you can access right now to help pay for college, then typically it has to be reported. So cash, check, savings as the day that you file the FAFSA. But again, your cash checking and savings can look very different today than it does tomorrow. We tell you this, if you've got money earmarked to like buy a new car, maybe do renovations on your home, if it's something that's not meant to help pay for school, you don't have to account it. Okay, the assets make up such a small portion of the SAI, 90% of it comes from your income. So don't fret about the assets. It's really not that big of a deal. So if you're not sure, err on the side of caution and put in zero. It's not going to be that big of a deal. In most cases, we're not going to ask you to prove it. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, I
What
saw a
about
question about, yeah, go ahead.
what about a grandparent who is a 529?
Yep, I was just
Does
going to
the
address that
parent
next.
have does the parent have to put that on there?
Absolutely not. It's in the parent's name, so it's good. It's in the grandparent's name. So if the parent would have one, then it goes on the parent as an asset. If a parent has a 529 plan with multiple children, only put in the amount earmarked for that particular child that you're filing the FAFSA for. So you don't put in the whole entire amount for all the children. You put it in what's earmarked for each individual child, or if you divide it in half, divide it in thirds, whatever. Okay, but always put it under the parent's asset information, not the student, because the parent's income is much more protected than the student's is. If you put it on the student, it's going to increase the SAI a lot more than it's going to for the parent. Again, 99% of the time, the assets are not going to change the aid eligibility because it's primarily driven by the income from the tax return. But yeah,
Okay. And just sort of a last thought here to everybody on this call. I live near DC as you do, and there are a lot of people, unfortunately, very sadly, losing their jobs right now. And when you file the FAFSA, you're filing prior year, so you're doing 2024, right?
correct.
2024 tax returns on the FAFSA this year.
Yep.
So if something has changed and you're using that information from 24, you need to call the financial aid office and explain to them what is going on. They are
Yep.
kind people.
Yes.
If you call them, they want to admit you. They want you to come to their school. They're going to work with you, but they can't if they don't know what's going on in your family. And this is another reason you have to do the FAFSA, because you have a better leg to stand on if you've done it, if you need
Yep.
to appeal the aid that you've been given. Okay. So
Absolutely.
please don't hesitate. If you lose your job or something happens that has changed drastically since 2024, please don't hesitate to call and speak to, you're going to get a real life person that's
Yep.
got a
No,
heart.
glad you brought that up because that's very important. We do have what we call a special circumstance team. Every school does. So that's the terminology you want to use. Say, I got a special circumstance. It could be a job loss for a reduction in income. It could be maybe you took a withdrawal from a retirement account for 1 year that inflated your AGI. Talk to the school.
Yes.
Every school has their own process. I can tell you at Penn State, we have to have the tax return before we can review it for you. Okay, so if it's 2025 reduction, we couldn't look at it until you file your taxes in the springtime. But the good news is we can still get you the aid. It's just gotten retroactively if it changes your aid. Typically, it comes down to qualifying for grant sources like the federal Pell Grant, things like that, that you didn't qualify for. Maybe it gets the student eligibility for the subsidized loans, not just unsubsidized loans. But again, that can save lots of money. So, yeah, reach out, talk to the Office of Student Aid or whoever, and say, I got a special circumstance. Something else to consider that changed recently as well is they used to ask you, well, actually, it still asks you how many kids you have in college. But it used to be if you had two kids in college, it would take your SAI, which used to be called something different, it would basically cut it in half. It doesn't do that anymore. But we've been comparing the last couple of years to see what happened, to see if it really affected people's aid or not. At Penn State, it hasn't really changed aid eligibility at all. But at other schools, that could be different. So if you have that situation, you got more than one in college, talk to your Office of Student Aid at the school and say, hey, I've got more than one in college. Can you do anything for me? Because some schools will. At Penn State, we don't, because like I said, we've been looking at it and it really hasn't changed aid at Penn State, but it could in other places. So it doesn't hurt to have a conversation and say, I got a special circumstance. What can you do for me?
Thank you. What if this is the last question? What if parents are retired? What do they use as income?
It's tax return. So whatever your tax return says, so it's all based upon that. Yep.
Right. So that can be a benefit.
Yeah. And one additional thing, especially in that case, there is skip logic built into the FAFSA. So depending upon if your income falls below a certain threshold, you may not be asked the asset questions at all. Some people get there and they go, I didn't get any asset questions. Is there something wrong? No, because depending upon your income, it might completely skip those over. So don't worry about that. Just go through the process, submit it. Again, it's working pretty seamlessly this year. So I think you'll all have a pretty good time with it.
All right. I know I said that was the last one, but this is the
Uh,
last one.
Not a
Okay.
problem.
Well, just one more, I promise. If you think your SAI will be too high for aid, you think it's going to be too high for aid. So if you put on the Common App that you aren't applying for financial aid, will the school still look at FAFSA for possible aid? Or do you need to put on the Common App that you're applying for financial aid for them to consider it? The wording on the Common App is kind of unusual. It says, are you
It
applying
is
for need-based aid? And people go,
correct.
well, I won't get need-based aid, but you still say yes because you're applying for FAFSA.
Correct. And if you don't, as long as you file the FAFSA, we're still going to give you anything that you're eligible for. Guaranteed, again, that direct loan that we talked about for sure. And then you're still going to be then eligible for a lot of the scholarships we talked about. So yeah, definitely file the FAFSA. Always a good idea. And yeah, you can still be awarded if you file the FAFSA. That's the application. The application to Penn
Thank
State, separate, individual of each other. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, thank you. Like I said, I've learned a lot, and I am going to be
Good.
referring you to some of my colleagues if you don't mind.
Absolutely. That's what we're here for.
Thank
Happy to
you.
do it. So yeah, you're very welcome.